and I'm good to go.
All right, guys, we're gonna get started. Thanks for coming to the Jamstack Dallas meetup. Today we have a special guest from Netlify, Brian Douglas, BDougieYo on Twitter. If you want to follow him. Going to be talking about webpack. You know, I personally use webpack quite a bit, but there's always tons for me to learn. I'm really excited to hear everything he has to say about webpack. He's born in Fort Worth, so he is kind of a homecoming for him. And he also hosts Jamstack Radio podcast. So if you like what you hear tonight, you want to get some more Brian goodness, Jamstack Radio. Without further ado.
Cool. I also have some Jamstack stickers on the corner there. I'll just leave them with you, Covington. I'll make sure I send way more when I get back to San Francisco. But as you mentioned, so like I've kind of been in a lot of places. I live in Oakland now, which is just on the other side of the bay of San Francisco. I work in San Francisco mostly when I'm not working from home. But yeah, I'm out here to do this meetup, and I'm actually pretty excited to talk about this. How many people use Webpack? Some people have heard of it at least. If not, I can explain to you exactly what it does, and I'll show you. So I'm going to talk through the architecture first and what Webpack's all about, and then I'm going to do some live coding and show you how to get it up and running from scratch. Because I know at IronYard you guys use Create React App for the most part. The cool thing about that is that Webpack's actually it used to be really hard to get up and running and make it work. It's actually much nicer now, and I'll show you why that is. But Create React App actually abstracts that away from you, so you have to eject to even see the config. And I'll talk about that in a sec. But we're here to talk about Jam and packing with Webpack. But I want to start a little with the story. Anybody know who this guy is? This is Kanye West. He's a rapper. And he came on the scene. His first album that I bought, which College Dropout, came out in 2004. He was actually making beats for Jay-Z and other people before that. But what's really interesting about him is that he actually changed the scene of rap. Not that he changed it, he actually made a different type of rap become more mainstream. And this rap is actually called backpack rap. It's also known as conscious rap. So you know people like Talib Kweli, Common, Mos Def. You can even throw Q-Tip in there as well, some of his stuff post the Busta Rhymes era. All that stuff is a Tribe Called Quest. All the stuff is like conscious rap, stuff that's not about like, drinking bubbly and all that other stuff. So anyway, what was interesting is because he made that mainstream. What I'm trying to get at is that backpack rap changed the scene. So we came from a scene in 2004 where we had this do-rag rap era, where you had to be hard to rap, which was pretty serious. So you had to like actually carry on a persona in order to actually make it mainstream with rap. And Kanye actually changed the game so much that he made it okay for you to actually wear your pants at your waist and wear proper clothing and basically be respectable when people are taking pictures of you and stuff like that, which is cool because around this time I was like in high school and my mom and grandma bought my clothes, so like I couldn't wear my pants at my ankles because they all fit. So it was kind of hard to sag my pants when they fit on my waist. So much so that people like, you guys know 50 Cent? You've heard of him? So he's like basically irrelevant now because it was no longer cool and in vogue to be gangster in rap. I guess you can kind of debate that whether or not gangster is still a thing. I wouldn't consider any rappers out today very gangster. I think they carry on that persona that came through the 90s very well. This is me on BDougieYo on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I also work at Netlify, which is a company that's paying for me to be here. Check them out. All the slides here are on bundled.netlify.com. So bundled with a D at the end. And that's Netlify. Netlify, does anybody not know what Netlify is so far if you weren't here earlier today? Netlify is a Git-centric solution for the modern developer, meaning we host websites. So if you want to host a website, come talk to us or go through our sign-up flow and see if you have something that works. We're very developer-focused, so we're not client-focused, so we recommend you have a developer host your site for you if you are a client or end user. And you guys familiar with Jamstack, JavaScript, APIs, and markup? There's like another term for like front-end or even like static plus. New dynamic is another term that gets used. dynamically rendered static is another term I've heard someone use, which is very disgusting. But anyway, so Jamstack, we compile stuff. We use stuff like Webpack. We bundle dynamic JavaScript and Angular, React, Vue, whatever, and it gets compiled in something static that can be hosted for pennies on the dollar. I like using this analogy, so if you guys are here earlier, this is basically where we're at. This is the do-rag wrap era. This is like monolithic, isomorphic, JavaScript rendered, Rails, Python, .NET, whatever applications, all jammed into one jar. Jamstack's all about separating those separate. So you have your jelly and you have your peanut butter. Peanut butter being your server, jelly being your front-end code. So that way, if what I did last year or last summer, which take Netlify's code and make it go from Angular to React, I did that in 6 weeks. I was able to go from Angular to React. It took me 6 weeks. The first 3 weeks, it took me 3 weeks to do it and 3 weeks to fix it. So collectively, it was 6 weeks. But it only took me 6 weeks because I didn't have to touch the server. Like all the server code was already working. I just had to write a new app on top of it and then switch to the right branch and the right repo. And again, it's all about the jam. Kanye did mention I do Jamstack Radio. It's a podcast. Check it out. It's on iTunes. I already mentioned this. I kind of jumped the gun a bit, but I converted Angular to React for Netlify, and now to the meat of this, Webpack. So Webpack's, what is Webpack? Can anybody describe it in 1 word? 2 words? 3 words?
Bundler?
Module bundler. Module bundler, it does handle your asset pipeline for you, technically. It does a lot more stuff than that, but mainly modules. Modules are really cool because like new JavaScript is all about modules, and they do it very well with the import-export stuff. But the question is like, why modules? Why do we want modules? Well, it's because modules, we can actually do really cool things like split up our code. Has anybody made a website with just like an index.html, like from scratch? Cool.
Done it at some point, right?
Yeah, you do it at some point. At some time, you're in your career, you'll probably touch something like this. Like grandma or mom have something that.
You get to the point with 20 script tags you do get wrong.
Yeah, I got one. I was actually going to show it, but so I had. I probably closed it, didn't I? Hold on. Look. Yeah, so I have an Angular app that a student actually built. I mentor some students on the side very sporadically, and a student built this in Angular using no NPM, just index.html, so that's totally possible. And this is an earlier stage because I forked this very early on, but this is like his JavaScript stuff. So he's like getting Firebase, Angular, and that's what it is. So it is a very simplistic chat app that he built, but this is just messaging, like nothing else. So imagine like adding Moment.js and Lodash and all this stuff all in script tags. Gets a little insane. Webpack kind of solves that for us. You're able to use things like NPM and actually bundle things and actually only use packages when you need them. So imagine something that's like really large like a Lodash or a Moment.js to handle your date strings. You might not need that on every page. And with Webpack, you have an option of making that very specific per page. So reduce the use of script tags. Oh, I have a screenshot. I don't know why I keep jumping the gun on my slides. It's probably because I'm mirroring my screen and I'll get a preview. But yeah, this is a later version of that app I showed you. And not only is it just the JavaScript, like jQuery and stuff like that are being added, but it's also every JavaScript file in the entire app. So if he has actually this is a different app. This is a Spotify clone. And every single, like the song player, the list of songs, the playlist, everything is all a different script that you have to load. So if you have a massive app, that gets kind of tedious. It's also super hairy to debug when you forget to add one of those files. You're like, oh, what's going on? So modules actually they help you abstract code, encapsulate code, so basically keeping code in its own box and container. It also is very useful for reuse. So if you bundle your stuff properly, you can even like put stuff on NPM to be shared. Like, what was that one NPM package that broke the internet?
LeftPad.
LeftPad. Yeah, something that's only 4 lines of code. You can just throw it up on NPM and have it in a bundle, and then break the internet. Please don't break the internet. And also managing the dependencies. So before Webpack, and even before ES6, we had these other 2 patterns. There's another one I've never used before, so I leave it out because I don't know how to explain it. But AMD is one way. And CommonJS, does anybody use the require parens strings. So that's common.js, comes like with, I think it's built into ES5. And then ES6 has its own module way to bundle JavaScript files. So that's what AMD looks like. You just pass some stuff in there. It looks a lot like Angular, if you ever did Angular. Angular really loves the syntax with the square brackets. Common.js, it's very common if to see this in Anyways, yeah, anybody watch the Apple keynote? When they were like, oh, we use the latest JavaScript, ECMAScript 5.
Ew.
Yeah, that was said on the stage. It's like, no, wait, hold on, there's a new version. Anyway, we're out of touch. And then there's ES6. So ES6, you have to export. Is anybody using ES6 today? Yeah, cool. Jump on the train. I guess no one else is using JavaScript. I won't judge you. All right, Webpack module. So it's a bundle. So I have a bundle, and I bundle everything into a bundle.js. So imagine this is a JavaScript file. So Webpack, you have a bundle, but the problem with this, like if you have everything in one file, all your JavaScript, it's pretty massive to like host. You come to like a place like Netlify, you can host this. Your build time might be a little slower, but you can host it. And that's super optimized. Also, if you go to your index.html, or your home page rather, and you see all that JavaScript, and then you go to the contact page, and you load all that JavaScript again, like you're just constantly loading the same files. I mentioned earlier today during talking to the students at Iron Yard that, actually, did I mention it or did I dream it? I met a Nigerian developer who basically, did I talk about this? Okay. Oh, well, I didn't talk about it. Anyway, I met a Nigerian developer who he was visiting his family. He's actually learning how to code right now as well in a boot camp out in the Bay Area. And he was visiting his family. And before when he sends his family like a link, they always ask him like what's on it because they don't want to actually download all that JavaScript and all that megabits to their phone because they have a very limited amount of bandwidth. So that's problematic if that's what your JavaScript bundles out to. So keep that in mind. And I'm gonna Webpack 2, and even prior to like Webpack 1, it really comes down to like 4 concepts that you really need to know to understand Webpack. Again, like things like Create React App, they abstract this, so it's a lot easier to use Webpack when it's already built for you. But I really recommend like understanding like how it's built and what are the different parts of it. And these are the different 4 parts. So you have an entry, you have an output, you have loaders, and then you have plugins. And I'll break these down in a sec. And this is what it looks like. So this is like a very basic Webpack config. So Webpack is nothing but just a giant object with keys that have entry, output, module, which are really your loaders, and then plugins, which are your plugins. So not sure why loaders are not, oh, sorry. Loaders are called rules in Webpack 2. I think before it was called loaders in Webpack 1. I don't know why the change, but I guess it makes sense because these are rules. Things like Babel and CSS, like if you want to do like Sass or less, you would add rules in your Webpack module to be able to compile that stuff. And I'll talk about that in a second. So starting with the entry point. So when you have Webpack, Webpack needs to know like where your code comes from. Like where's the bundle.js or the index.js, where is that located? So that's basically all that is. And with Webpack, it's all about input-output. So it wants to know where all your code is, and then it wants to know where you want to put it when they're done doing the Webpack magic. So in this case, I am using path, which is native to Node. You could use that to find out where your current path is. And then I'm just making a new folder called dist. And I'm going to put, in that dist, I'm going to put a bundle.js. So at the moment, I'm not going to do anything with my Webpack bundle. I'm just going to take that file.js and then move it to bundle.js. Not very useful, but I'll talk about that in a sec. And with the loaders, I mentioned Babel. You can do CSS loaders and processors, Sass, less, and Elm. We use Elm at Netlify for a very small portion of our app. Elm's a Haskell. It's JavaScript that runs through a compiler built on Haskell. Super fancy stuff, but because we have Webpack, we can just add an Elm rule. So that way, if Webpack finds Elm code, which looks way different than JavaScript, then it knows what to do. So it's just adding rules. It's almost basically adding plugins to your project, but instead adding it to Webpack. I forgot to highlight plugins, but I'll go that. Actually, I didn't forget. I'm going to talk about that later because I want to talk about that more in detail. So why Webpack? It's super important to like make sure your bundle like is actually bundled and that you're actually not serving up like megabits of data in an app for reasons I just explained. So just like Netlify.com, we use Webpack, but we also use all this other stuff in addition to like a static site generator. So we're a little kind of cuckoo on the way we do things around Netlify. But we do this on purpose because Hugo is a really cool static site generator. It's super fast, but it has no asset pipeline. So our CEO built a asset pipeline on top of Webpack, Gulp, and PostCSS, and NPM as well. So like using all these bundlers. It was kind of like a side project for him that became a thing that we use now. So we're like, we love it. But because of that, we're able to bundle stuff, and we're actually able to get really good response times. Plus the fact, like this is good response times because we're on a CDN. That's a caveat. Like you don't always get good response times just because you bundle your stuff really small. It also is about delivery. And another really cool thing about Webpack and why Webpack is because code splitting. And ideally, what code splitting looks like is this. Like you have your index.html, you have your about page, you have your gallery page, you have another page that you do stuff on. Like you're able to split that up and make sure your bundles are like equal. So that way if someone goes to a different page, they're only loading only what they need. In reality, it normally looks like this. Like there's stuff that gets cross-pollinated between different projects or different files. So like I said, with Moment.js, you might be using it on the first page, but you might also be using it on the second page. So stuff gets included everywhere. Ideally, Webpack, you can get to this. I've actually seen people do this before. It's like it's magic. It's almost like solving a Rubik's Cube. Like it's possible. It just takes a lot of work. You just kind of find the pattern, which is super awesome. I personally I've never had a site that looked like this before, but one day. Cool, and then sometimes it actually looks like, in reality, it actually looks like this as well, where you load your index.html, and then you have all these other sites that get loaded in addition as well. So that's ideally what code splitting really looks like, but with enough massaging, we can get there. We won't get there today, though. I also want to mention, because of code splitting, we can do things like the Netlify CMS, which essentially is what we do, like a Jekyll site or a Hugo site or any sort of static site generator. You guys know what I mean by static site generators? I think Gatsby, you guys talked about Gatsby last week as well. So like Gatsby is a static site generator that compiles down, it's built on React and compiles down to like Markdown files. Not a good example because the Netlify CMS is a React app, so you might get confused. But with Gatsby, we can actually shove another React app inside of a Gatsby React app. And we can actually code split it so that way the React app for Gatsby shows what it needs to show, and we show the CMS what it needs to show, if that makes sense. Actually, let me show you exactly what that means. So I go to netlify.com. This is Hugo, no React at all. If I go to /admin, this is the React app. So I'm actually loading a React app on the same quote-unquote server. It's actually bundled statically. But yeah, I'm able to have a React app inside of here. And I think I could prove that by showing my Redux actions. So technically React, because you can see all those Redux actions happening. I don't know. You guys use Redux? I don't think I really needed to prove that. I don't know. Anyway. Cool.
I got a question about code splitting.
Yeah.
With React, let's say that you have I don't know, 10 different routers, right? About us, like 900 different pages. Right?
Yeah.
Let's say you have an ad bar component that's shared among all those pages. How do you, let's say you have a whole bunch of shared components that are used across the whole website. How is that split?
I would think of it more like taking snapshots of each page. Because going back to code splitting, like this is perfect, yes. But you will have a nav bar that's going to have shared stuff that's going to happen. So it's going to look more like this. You can grow and shrink boxes as you want, but there will be cross-pollination between things. Again, like perfection is really the enemy of good, or good enough rather. So I wouldn't strive to do this. I would strive to do more like this. where you have that nav bar that everything circles around. But again, like it's possible depending on how you set up your code. Again, I've also never done this before, never done that before. But I've got sites that look like this and this. And I'm actually going to show you these boxes in this, at the end of it too, and how to look at your apps. Plugins, these are really cool plugins. Things to like minify your bundle, add uglify.js and stuff like that. You can add with plugins. There's actually, Gatsby used to be built on a webpack static page webpack plugin. I don't think they still do that. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering something. So is webpack a replacement for Build? Or do you use it in, because a lot of what you're describing is what I would have used Build.
Yeah. So, correct. And no. So, Webpack is a module bundler. So, like what Gulp does module bundling, but Gulp is actually really good at task running. So, Webpack doesn't replace task running at all. It just
you're talking about plugins and
yeah.
stuff like that. Just right near it. Like, oh.
Yeah. So you can use Gulp with Webpack. We use Gulp with Webpack because our designer is crazy and he writes code and he loves Gulp. So if he starts a project and we don't beat him to it, he'll put Gulp in the project. Totally fine. But also, NPM is a task runner as well. So then, you technically could just do what Gulp does with Webpack and NPM, or you can just do everything with Gulp. And it's actually, there's a lot of choices out there, but I will say that Webpack is at the point, it's at Google, the Chrome Summit back in November. They put up a slide, Adi Osmani, he's a developer advocate of the Chrome team. For any site that's using a bundler, like modern web, the choice is Webpack for all sites using a bundler. So it's not all sites, but all sites using a bundler at this point now is Webpack.
So would Gulp call Webpack? Or would Webpack call?
Gulp can call Webpack. I mean, it's all JavaScript at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Like how would you? Why would you? Because it seems like with those plugins, and
yeah.
I would have this whole pipeline. Just doing Gulp. It seems like they're almost doing the same thing in Webpack.
Yeah. What Netlify does personally for Gulp, we do a lot of more menial things. So we have a Gulp task that Webpack can't do this. We have a Gulp task that takes our entire content in Markdown and parses it into JSON, and then uses that output for search. So if you go to netlify.com and you search, that's how we do that. We do that for Gulp tasks because you can't do that in Webpack.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what we use Gulp for. So we don't double up on things unless someone got through code review and no one noticed. Yeah. Another cool thing we do with the Webpack, we have a CMS boilerplate, the Caldy template. I shared a site earlier today at lunch called templates.netlify.com. This one right here uses Gulp to interject environment variables. So any environment variables you want to share on the fly, like access tokens, this site actually does it. So if you go in the code, you can actually, I won't share it now, but I think if you click this link, it goes to the code. Yeah. So you click the title, and you can find the gulp.js or whatever it's called, or gulp.babel.js. I forget what we named it. So plugins. You do a lot of really cool things, like environment variable handling, and then also minifying code, etc. And then now I am going to do some live coding. Yeah. So I'm not going to talk about this stuff first. I'm actually going to just build Webpack from scratch. So does that work for you guys? Bigger? Can you read that? Cool. All right, so I just need to make sure I'm on the right page. Oh, of course, it's on the wrong tab. All right, so I got a repo. It's at my name, bdougie/webpackhack. You can totally do this on your own. I don't think I have the steps in there. I'll add them to the README after this. But what's really cool about Webpack is that, let me see, do I have anything? So I have basically a folder that has nothing except a package.json. And the only reason I have a package.json is because I added Webpack to it. Oh, I didn't add Webpack to it. Oh, I did. Sorry. I have Webpack here. So I'm using Webpack 2.3.1. I think there's a newer version out now, but this should do exactly what I want. So Webpack, all it wants is the input and output. So it wants your bundle, and then it wants to output that. So if I'm going to do like error-driven development. So in order to run your bundle for Webpack, you just run Webpack. And the first complaint is actually, I need a Webpack config.js. If you go to the getting started guide for Webpack, it actually will show you this stuff. But I just wanted to show how easy it is to get Webpack up and running. So if I run Webpack now, it's going to complain I have no input and output. And it's because I don't have an input and output. So I'm going to create a source file. That's not right. McDir. So I got a source file now. And inside that source file, I'm just going to touch a source index.js. And inside that, I'm just going to do some really intense JavaScript. Cool. So now if I run that file, this is not bundle. This is like just regular JavaScript, totally fine. If I run Webpack, it's still not going to work, and that's because actually in my Webpack config, I need to actually create that object, that config, with the object, and edit. Yes. Okay. What happened? Oh, I have this open somewhere, don't I? All right. So I'm just going to create an empty object for now. It's not going to really do anything for us, because I haven't actually established the fact that there's an input and output. So going back to input and output, input is entry, output is output. So let's do that now. With that. Entry. Sorry, I'm going to get a Vim. I'm actually going to use Mac Vim because this is very problematic. All right, that looks better. Sorry, I'm actually a Mac Vim user, but for some reason when I live code, I like to use regular Vim. Does anybody use Vim out there? Cool. You guys are cool programmers. Emacs. Don't do Emacs. We have one dev on our team that does Emacs, and he does Emacs, but he does an emulator to run Vim inside of Emacs. Yeah, he's a weirdo. Oh, you know what? I'm going to import path. Actually, let me skip one step. I always forget the boilerplate, so I'm just going to stash this stuff. I'm going to go straight to step 2. Cheating. All right. So I've got my Webpack here. I already have that, so I actually need to go to step 3. Let's just, I did this already, so I'm just going to go step by step. You don't need to see me live code. What is the diff? Okay, step 4. That's right. Step 4 is the one where I do input and output. Sorry about that. There we go. So I have a console.log, it works. Basically what I was starting to do. And then I have a Webpack config that has an entry point and an output. So what I'm doing here is path is like it's built in a node, just tells me where the current path is. I already know my entry is index.js, and I know that I want to make it my bundle.js, a new file called bundle.js, and put it in dist. So rather than work through all those errors, I run webpack and it actually works now because I have input and output. What's really cool here is it actually tells you how big your bundle size is. Lower is better in this, like in all cases, for the most part. And I can also see my output, what happened. I now have a disk folder. I have a bunch of JS. What do you think is going to be in there? It works. What's all this stuff?
Works really well.
Works really well. So it works actually is right here. All this stuff is that import, so requiring, because we're using npm to install Webpack, we're actually not requiring Webpack directly. But if I were to require Webpack on top of the file, this is what that is doing. So all that Webpack importing goes up here. If I imported, I think is path in this file. So that path stuff is not in here, it's the Webpack one. But anyway, that's all the requiring stuff that happens that npm does for you, all that magic. And then this is our bundled code. So it takes, like, normally what would be hidden from you when you run node index.js, and it just exposes it. Because it's a bit faster to run code when you can see it, for whatever reason. That's cool, but what if we wanted to make this ES6? And I have a text file with all this. So I did this talk before, a long time ago, back when Node 6 was a thing. Now we're on Node 8, which was, yeah, like last month. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So yeah, but now, since I'm actually, what am I on? I'm on 7. I'm using 7. This is actually going to work. Normally this wouldn't work, but now since ES6 is like a thing everybody should be using, where'd it go? Did I save it? Oh, I have to call it. I left out a text. I promise you it works. It works. Cool, because I literally have to call ES6 classes with new and all that other stuff. What do you think is going to happen when I bundle this? It's going to convert to ES5? See, it was like 2.4 before, now it's 2.7.1. We have more lines of code now, like 3 more lines of code. That's huge. Might have to pull out the big servers for this one. All right, moment of truth. Still a bunch of all that require garbage, but it's still ES6. So I'm going to actually use a loader now. I'm going to use Babel because not every browser, even though we can use this in Node, not every browser can actually run that code. I can't name I guess i11 can't run the code. So any IEs, Internet Explorers can't run this code. So it might be in our best interest to actually transpile this with Babel to make that ES5 instead of ES6. Cool part about that is actually I already did this. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to go to the branch. And I already ran on this branch for a reason. I already ran it. But you can see that this is being transpiled to ES5. So now it will work on any browser, no matter what, with some caveats. Honestly, it should work. I mean, it's console down. That's from Babel. Babel actually imports this. So if you use any ES6 stuff, you don't need to actually add this to your index.js if you're doing JavaScript. It's actually built in the Babel's transpilations. Transpilation is like a weird word that always get auto-corrected when I do a talk or a blog post. It's not a real word, I don't think so. But that's the code still. And I'll show you exactly what we did in the Webpack. The only difference is that this has been added. And I'll go by line. So again, loaders are rules, and these are things that we can transpile Babel with. So it's just looking for anything that's a JavaScript file. It's just using regex to find all JavaScript files inside the source folder, apply the Babel loader, and use rules from the Babel RC. So the Babel RC, and again, Create React App does all this for you out of the box. It'd be very advantageous for you to know this, because if you're trying to get a front-end job, chances are they're probably going to ask you questions about how this works. Well, if you apply for Netlify, we will ask how it works. And then within the Babel RC, if you ever use ESLint or JSHint or linting like Rubocop, or there's one like PyLint or something, you guys are new Python here. You can actually set rules, so that way you can say, I just want the current node version, and then make sure everything works. I won't go how Babel rules work. They have really good documentation. Again, Webpack has good documentation. But now, I just want to say all this, is that now we have ES6 code that transpiles to ES5 code. But what if you want to add React? How do you do that? React's got some caveats. JSX is a caveat, like you have to have a Babel loader for JSX. There is also, I think JSX is the biggest problem. It's ES6 that we already have. Again, I already have this. I already have this on a branch, so I'll just talk through it. Check out step 6. How many people do React here? Familiar with it? Have you seen code of it? This is React code. So on this like ES6, you can import React from React. I'm using npm to load this on my package.json. Modulating is built in standard for ES6, so I can export this class, and that way Webpack knows what it is when it goes to read it. And rather than it works, I'm actually just doing hello world. You don't have to call it because it's a component. It just gets invoked. It's also being included using React DOM. So React is a virtual DOM. You can use that component I made, which is being imported right here. That's the component. It just gets put right in the DOM, and then it gets rendered right on the page. So super contrived example, not very realistic. I mean, who wants a Hello World app? It's been done. Maybe Hola Mundo. It's a different one, Spanish version. Just kidding. So that's that. So I had to add a couple other things in my Webpack. Actually, I didn't have to have anything. This all knows it. Why does it know it? Oh, because of my Babel RC. Duh. I just added one rule called React. And there we have it. So now my dist knows how to read all that React code. It's a lot of code, huh? Just for Hello World? It's actually including React as a library as well. So that's also something to think about too. If you use something like a library like jQuery, which is super massive, this is Hello World in React. Look how many lines of code this is. So always good to think about like how big your bundle size is. Based on Hello World in React is 21,000 lines of code because it has to include every package you use. Host that in Heroku, you're paying for that every time someone hits it. And also, you can see my output actually went down a bit. Actually, no, sorry, that's just for one file. My total output is 725 for Hello World and React. So quite big. So consider if you want to do Hello World on a page, do that maybe in just HTML. Yeah, I'd probably just use HTML. Cool. Couple other things that I didn't go over. That kind of ends the live coding. With Webpack, you can do build size optimization. So things like those 21,000 lines, you can make sure you're not including React twice. It's funny, like people do this all the time with Lodash. Like it'll get included from a third-party library would be using Lodash, and you can use that third-party library to use Lodash, but also include Lodash in your project. So it's such a big problem that Webpack, the community, built a Lodash Webpack plugin to make sure you only load Lodash once. And that's like across the board for all plugins. Like sometimes that happens. So if pennies per usage and stuff like that really adds up for your use case, I'd consider seeing if you can make that smaller by doing that. Image optimizations as well, you can do that on the fly with Webpack. You can even do stuff like well, I wouldn't recommend it. I was going to say you can send stuff to S3 and convert that, but I would use a plugin in JavaScript just for that. Environment variables, even though this is a front-end focused just app, you can have the idea of environment variables in your app through Webpack. Offline access for service workers, also a thing. So if I go to Preact.js, this is like a small version of React. It's actually really cool. I'm not sure why it flickered. But when I go to the site, it actually installs a service worker. So if I go to the network, and this is using the offline plugin, if I click offline, so that means I'm offline, no internet, and I refresh, it still loads. So you can actually fire off service workers from Webpack using the Webpack offline plugin. It's straight from Webpack, no configuration needed. You just have to load it up. I'd recommend configuring it because there's some problems with service workers if you just let it run forever. Like literally caching everything in your site. If you have a large site, you don't want to cache everything. Again, the Nigerian problem. Anyway, that sounded weird. So yeah, the same problem that Nigerians have, all those princes out there. They don't want to load all that stuff on their phone. So you're caching all that stuff for them. But it's really cool because you do that with Webpack using an offline plugin. Huge community. Check out their documentation. They literally list all these plugins out there. If you have a use case, you can do it. One other thing I didn't do in this project was minification. So even though I have 21,000 lines of code, I can actually minify this. So it's like, you guys know what I mean by minifying, uglifying? Like take all the spaces out, so that way you're just running JavaScript that looks super ugly, or uglifying it.
So it was one line.
Yeah, it becomes one line of code. Yeah, but then you can make this from 21,693 to maybe like 2,693. I mean, not 2,000, probably 20,000. You lose a couple lines. So, and actually, it matters for KBs if that's what it really matters for your project. So, that's the gist of Webpack. Hopefully, it seemed like a lot of people didn't actually have much experience with Webpack, so I'll end it there. But one really cool thing as well is that's Nicolas Cage. This is an app I was going to show about optimizing Webpack, but I'll hold off for that. This is a tool called Webpack Analyzer. And you can actually add this to your Webpack config and see exactly what your code splitting looks like. So in a real world, this is this is that giant box on top of all the smaller boxes. So everything bundles down. This is the Netlify CMS. Everything runs through that, but then you have all these other files that are also loaded. So for whatever reason, we probably want to look into Aspirima, whatever that does. I think that's the WYSIWYG editor, the underlying stuff for that. We could actually make that smaller. Moment.js is a huge issue. React, not going to make that any smaller until React 16 comes out. But I highly recommend checking that out. It's Webpack Analyzer. Anybody have any questions? Webpack Bundle Analyzer. So if you do a React app, I highly recommend using Create React App, which is this app here. So this is Create React App. NPM start. I built really quickly, and all it does is like pictures of Nicolas Cage. Like it comes from the Nicolas Cage, the Face to Cage. What is it called? It's an API that has the faces of Nicolas Cage. So if you just want to add images to your junk website. What's cool is that I made this really quickly one morning before work, and I can eject this, and inside of, I already did it actually, inside of that, I can then find my config, Webpack config, here. So you have to eject your actual React app to see your Webpack config. But what's really cool is that you can actually see exactly what the Facebook team is doing for their starter React app and what their preferred functions of doing that. You could also see they comment every line. So if you really want to learn how to use Webpack really well, highly recommend building a React app, ejecting it. Like don't even touch it, just eject it and read some of these comments to find out exactly what each one of these things are doing. And that's, if you aren't familiar, it's Create React App, which is the command line to build a React app really quickly. Cool. Question?
So for someone who do you have a recommended resource, or is it like tutorials if you want to?
Yeah. So that's the big problem with Webpack. It's really like Webpack 2 came out like 6 months before it was even released because they spent so much time on documentation. Because Webpack 1 was so hard to learn, they wanted to make sure Webpack 2 had really good documentation. So 1, read the docs. 2, try out Create React App because it's very inexpensive just to npm install Create React App and then run Create React App new app or whatever you want to call it, and then pick it apart and read it. 3, I do have on my repo, which is bduggy/webpack0, there's actually a link to this blog post, which is everything I showed you and then some of building Webpack from scratch. So you will know exactly how Webpack works if you go through this blog post. It's way longer. It's like probably a morning's worth of coding, but highly recommend it. So if you just check out that repo, I have it linked. You can also check out my repo, which has the steps I went through as well. But it's all about tinkering. It's like literally Webpack is your classic car, and you're going to be tinkering with it, making like just polishing the wheels and tires and seeing what happens when you change this and change that. Because there's tons of plugins to use to make your bundle size smaller, faster, and what have you. There's also options to if you're really into running servers. Webpack has a built-in server as well, so you can test things and tinker as well to see about making sure your site is as fast as it can be. And it's super useful, especially in the days of our front-end JavaScript frameworks that are super massive and need to get smaller. Cool. I don't have a podcast episode about Webpack. Hopefully soon I will. But highly recommend checking out Jamstack Radio for talks about this because we kind of go in depth. Even though the subjects aren't specifically on a bundler, we do talk about this a lot. It comes up a lot. Cool. If you guys want stickers, definitely grab some. Take them with you. Bring them back next time. And yeah, I will be around. I'll also be at React Dallas on Tuesday as well.